Today, we welcome Dr. Michael Roizen, an anesthesiologist and internal medicine physician with the Cleveland Clinic, who is passionate about helping people choose to live younger and healthier. In 2007, he was named the Chief Wellness Officer, the first such position in a major healthcare institution in the United States, and chair of Cleveland Clinic's Wellness Institute from 2007 to 2017. He is also the co-founder of Real Age Inc., which was sold in 2006, but still chairs its scientific advisory board. The concept of real age focuses on controllable factors that affect length and/or quality of life that are identified and optimized. Dr. Roizen is a past chair of a Food and Drug Administration Advisory Committee and a former editor for 6 medical journals. He has published more than 185 peer-reviewed scientific papers, 100 textbook chapters, 30 editorials, and 4 medical books, one of which is a medical bestseller, and received 13 US and many foreign patents. One of the drugs he co-invented and developed has been approved by the FDA. He is the author or co-author of 5 New York Times best-selling books on health and wellness and has received numerous awards for his work. He's given over 1,600 lectures to professional medical groups and has been recognized with over 20 professional lectureships. He has appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show, Today, 2020, CBN, CNN, Good Morning America, just to name a few. He has been involved in PBS specials, newspaper columns, and in his 18th year of a radio podcast, plus so much more, all while still practicing medicine. I am honored to welcome Dr. Michael Roizen.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to try and do screen share, which is always a challenge for me. So you'll have to tell me if this works. Are you seeing the correct mode?
Yes, it looks good.
Good. What I've titled this is The Opportunity of a Lifetime to be 40 again when your calendar strikes 90. The reason this is so important to understand in business is that if you look at the number of workers, that is people of working age, that has peaked already compared to the number of retireds. So when in 1960 there were 6.6 workers for every retired person, there are now about 3.7, and that continually declines, which means we have a budget problem unless we get healthy longevity. But everything changed with the Human Genome Project. When that was started, we expected to find 300,000 genes, both in the NIH and the private version of it, but they only found 22,500 genes, only of which 1,500 were on and producing proteins at any one time. That's really all genes do, is produce and direct protein direction. What was the rest of the DNA? Well, both the groups at NIH and the Ventnor group in private called it junk DNA. It was found 7 years later to be switches which control which proteins are on or off. And by age 18, you control at least 80%, and in the recent twin studies, 93% of which of your genes are producing proteins or not. So your genes make proteins. Those proteins make you and your health. I'm going to show this slide more than once because although there's a lot of information in this talk, this is the key thing. You get to control your genes. You are a genetic engineer for you. That's how you get to have a control of how long and well you live. So as we said, 300,000 genes. What was the rest of it? It was, if you will, switches. So, for example, this is stress management done in 25 nurses. The red, it's called a heat map. So this is strips of genes, one strip from each of 25 people. The red are genes that are on. The green are genes that are off. At N1, this is before they did a stress management program. N2 is 16 weeks later. It was a 6-week stress management program. M is a year later. What are these genes that were on and largely turned off? They make proteins that cause inflammation in your body. What are these that are off and get turned on? They make proteins that decrease inflammation in your body. So stress management is in fact what we consider, you may say it's puff or whatever. It is the most important thing in controlling the number of genes that are on or off as far as all the things we have tested. This is 52 guys with prostate cancer here, strips of their genes. This is a year later. So 1 year later, what are these genes that are on and they turned off? These are the RAS family of genes that cause or promote the growth of prostate, colon, and breast cancer. What happened? They turned them off. How did they turn these genes on? And by the way, these are the GSTM1 proteins that were off and get turned on. These two proteins cause breast, colon, and prostate cancer cells to commit suicide. What did they do? The three guys who quit smoking. They walked 10,000 steps a day. They eliminated 5 foods from their diet, and they meditated 15 minutes morning and night. It's now over 14 years later, and in those 14 years, when we last checked, only one of the 52 had progressed beyond this as treatment for his prostate cancer, as opposed to 32 in the comparison group. Here is a patient with coronary artery disease who literally couldn't walk more than 5 steps without chest pain. Here it is 2.5 years later. This is before statins. This is just with diet, stress management, and physical activity. He reversed it. It's the same exact thing. We used to think that that was due to the diet changing the fat and the concentration. No, what we now know is it's changing which of the genes are on. You are a genetic engineer for you. That's the key point. So let me go and give you an example. When you stress a muscle by walking, you turn on a gene that makes a small protein called Roizen. That Roizen goes to your brain and causes an increase in brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, which increases your hippocampal size and memory function. You are a genetic engineer for you. By stressing a muscle, you improve your brain functioning. So I want to make that point again. You are the most potent genetic engineer we know of for you. And I realize this is overkill, but I want to make that point many, many times. Here is the example. Your epigenes are what those switches are. This was a scientist, Yamanaka, who received the Nobel Prize for it, did literally 12 million experiments to find that you can reset your epigenes. So one of the theories of aging is that you get damage or changes in your epigenes based on your diet or based on the sun or based on whether you do physical activity or not, etc. But by turning these 4 genes on, you repair it to be the settings you had when you were young. So instead of your proteins not functioning as the way you were when you were young, you not having the energy that you had when you were young, you can reset that. When these 4 genes are turned on in mice with 2 available and inexpensive products, the mice become younger and live 50% longer. It's the equivalent of taking a 90-year-old mouse and making it a 40-year-old mouse. In human terms, your muscles, your pancreas, your brain all look younger. What was the problem? When you turn on all 4 of these, about 20% of the mice will develop a cancer within the equivalent of 2 human years. But now 6 groups, have now found that if you only turn on 3, don't turn on C. Mike, you in fact repair the damage without cancer. That's now going into human trial. So we have had life expectancy increasing 2.5 years every 10 years since 1890. That is over a decade. It's a 25-year increase. and initially due to childhood disease management and sanitation, more recently due to the management of chronic disease. Blue is the life expectancy of women, green men, blue women always have lived longer by 3 to 4 years than men. Um, and if you look at it, that's continued in the developed world. And in fact, if you look at the age adjusted death rate from heart disease, rather than being way out here, it's way down here. In fact, there's a 55% decline because of that management. 450,000 fewer deaths in 2019 occurred in the United States than would have occurred if we had continued the death rates for cardiovascular disease. And it's occurred in all age groups, have seen that decline in the heart disease death rate. And in fact, I'm going to skip over this other than to say there are drugs in development which wipe out the cause of heart disease and stroke. Cancer death rates have declined 33% since 1992, or we've had 150,000 fewer deaths in the United States than would have occurred. And that's how we've gotten this increase in life expectancy. The increase in life expectancy, by the way, has still occurred on the coasts. And you'll hear that the CDC says life expectancy has declined. It has by what we call what we call periodic life expectancy, the calculation of life expectancy at birth, expecting people to die of COVID and opioid usage the same way they have last year. But if you're 55 or older, that is, cohort life expectancy has continued to increase. We expect in the next decade that we're going to see a 30-year increase due to the progress from the Human Genome Project. Let me show you what I mean by that. I love doing that, so I'm going to do that again. And that is a huge increase in life expectancy based on these 14 areas of research into the mechanism of aging that have all shown in at least 2 animal species that they can take a equivalent to 90-year-old animal and make it the equivalent in human years of a 40-year-old animal. You're going to get to expand your 40s to 60s greatly if this medical progress that we see in animals can be translated to humans. And by the way, it isn't just theory now. Harvard, MIT, and one other group after Hopkins have started to do this in dogs. You can get a 17 to 19-year-old dog for $7,000 to be a 3-year-old puppy again in these 2 companies that have started. What does that mean for you and humans? Well, if you're 55, when you were born, you were expected to live to 74. Now you're expected to live to 82. We think it's closer to 115, which means if you're 55, it's likely you have 60 more years. But a lot of that is younger years. So you get to live between 40 and 60 more years. That's what at least the animal models show. I know I'm going pretty quick, and I'm going to go through some of these 14 areas, one of which is senolytics, the harvesting of old proteins. So this person donates a unit of blood, or she actually donates all of her blood. It comes back, the red cells come back. The plasma, her old plasma, and where the proteins reside, get thrown away. She gets new plasma. And this was done in what is called the AMBAR, AMBAR studies. You can Google it. And if you look here, it's the only reversal of Alzheimer's disease we have. By getting rid of the old proteins, these people's cognitive function progressively improved as opposed to the control group, which went down. So all of these 14 areas are moving into humans. I'm going to go through one more. That is, we repair ourselves with stem cells. Why do you get to a hospital soon after a stroke or heart attack? It's to open up the blood vessels so you save marginal tissue, but it's also to open up those blood vessels so your stem cells come in and repair it. After a heart attack, you may have an ejection fraction, the amount of blood your heart ejects, that goes from 60% down to 35%. If you get there fast enough, those stem cells come in, and over 6 weeks, they become heart cells again, or new heart cells, and they regrow. Well, recently, in a lab at Hopkins, they've been able to regenerate the ends of stem cells. So instead of you having a limited number of stem cells, you may, at least in these dogs and mice, have a infinite level of stem cells to repair your cells in the future. Another one of the areas, my favorite, as you all, well, this isn't my favorite, but protein inhibition, a water pill, a $4 a month water pill was found at UC San Francisco in the Gladstone to inhibit the attachment of amyloid and tau to neurons by inhibiting it. This is an old water pill, a generic. They looked at all 1,300 drugs approved by the FDA. They found that this one, by quantum computing, they used the IBM quantum computer, inhibited it. They then went into mice, and it prevented the development of Alzheimer's disease in mice. They then looked at 2 human databases, and it inhibits it in both of those, 70 and 72% reduction. So they're now doing a randomized controlled trial in humans to see if they can prevent Alzheimer's disease. And my favorite, of course, is the epigenetic reprogramming that I showed you, where you can reset the proteins and get younger. That's been done in 2 species and is now being tried. As you see, Google's Moonshot is doing it, as well as a group at Hopkins and a group at Harvard, MIT, a group in Switzerland, a group in San Diego, and a group in Sacramento. So there's 6 labs now, and my guess is one of these will move into human studies. I'm not going to go over my conflicts of interest. You've heard about those already. Why is this so important for you to get healthy? Just to make one correction, if you will, I have 4 number 1 and 9 overall top 10 bestsellers rather than just 5. I'm proud of that. Real Age Displaced Harry Potter for 7 days is number 1 on Amazon. When You, the Owner's Manual, came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 35 days. When You on a Diet, it still holds the record. It displaced Harry Potter for 177 days is number 1 on Amazon. Why is it important for you to get healthy? Well, one of the things you can do is 30% of patients with heart failure have an abnormal amyloid made by their liver. By gene editing, it's a $5 technique. That is $5 worth of gene editing material was injected into 12 people with heart failure who had this form of heart failure in Australia. 7 of the 12, instead of having a ejection fraction under 12%, ended up with ejection fractions of 35% or more. And instead of having a life expectancy under 6 months, they now have life expectancies of 18 years. What happened with the other 5 of the 12? They had structural damage so severe as it couldn't be repaired. So the point is, you have to protect yourself if you're going to get the reboot. So it's important to avoid structural damage as much as possible so you can take advantage of the great age reboot when it comes. You are a genetic engineer for you. Can it be done? Yeah, at the Cleveland Clinic, by doing this program, just to get to 6 normals plus 2, we went from 6% having this to over 44%. It saved us over $190 million a year, over $1.4 billion now. The key is the earlier you start, the better. So getting your LDL cholesterol from 140 to 70 reduces your risk between 3 and 6% in the first year, but 30% by year 30. Start early to get healthy is the major thing. And there's clearly a multiplier if you get all 6 normals: blood pressure, body mass index, fasting blood sugar, LDL cholesterol, no cotinine, tobacco end products or vaping end products in your urine, and a stress management program active. And then the +2 is see a primary care provider and immunizations up to date. The key point to remind you about is change your attitude. You are a powerful genetic engineer for you. To prevent brain dysfunction, there actually are 40 choices you can do. I'm going to go over a couple of them just to show you how easy it is. Getting a flu shot. This is people who got 6 flu vaccinations in 6 years in Scandinavia versus those who got 0. The ones who got 0 had a cumulative incidence of Alzheimer's disease 40% greater than those who got just the flu shot. The flu is a very inflammatory thing which stimulates dementia. Preventing it with immunizations is one easy way. People often object to statins, but the side effects of statins in preventing bone fractures, et cetera, are substantial. Another one of the, if you will, 2 more of the things is adding speed to both your physical activity and your brain games, that is processing games. So we call them speed of processing games. In physical activity, people always say, where's the data on 10,000 steps? Well, it came from a Japanese pedometer manufacturer. This is all-cause mortality. You see 4,000 is greater than 2, and 6 is greater than 4, and 8 is greater than 6, but 10 is the optimal point for minimum work with maximum benefit. And that's true whether you're a man or a woman, no matter what your age, no matter what your ethnicity. If you're looking at all cause of dementia, again, it is 10,000 that is the sweet spot in steps per day. If you will, why do you want to do fast brain games? That is games that challenge you for speed. Doing crossword puzzles helps you with doing crossword puzzles. Doing memory games helps you with memory games. But it's only speed of processing that prevents dementia. And it's because you turn on the repair system in your brain. Just as when you exercise and tear a muscle because you stress it, it turns on the repair system in the muscle. When you jump, you turn on a repair system in your bone that makes your bone stronger. When you force your brain to function faster, you injure it and you turn on the repair system that makes your brain better. So you are a genetic engineer for you. 4 smells daily decreases dementia rates by about 30%. What does that mean? It means intentionally smelling coffee or smelling alcohol or smelling rosemary or lavender. For any 4 smells in the human trials, it's been done twice now. Hearing aids, if you're short of hearing, they both prevent falls and prevent dementia by about 29%. Black coffee or tea, more cups, better. So there are 40 things you can do, even simple having a half or more tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil a day decreases dementia. So these are key things. That is, how do you get your proteins younger? It is, you do many of these things. Now, why is this important for people outside of the individual, you doing it, or you in business to understand? Well, it's because, if you will, you should change your attitude. You're a genetic engineer for you. Only eat food you love that loves you back. Food's a relationship like a marriage. You wouldn't marry someone who is trying to kill you. You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. You need a team. You can't do it alone. Add speed to your body and brain. 4 smells a day, 4 cups of coffee a day, and a half tablespoon of olive oil. And the most important is what you do with CLC when you meet in person. Manage stress and include cultivating your posse and purpose. Now, I'm going to go into what's happening economically. I went into this at the beginning. Our working force, because of a decrease in fertility, has stabilized, whereas we're having more retireds, which means fewer people to support them. What does that mean from the CBO? This is the Congressional Budget Office. It means our GDP is likely to be cut in half in the next 40 years compared to the last 40, which means that if you look at government revenue, discretionary and mandatory spending, that the government will have to slowly shut down. This is not my figures. These are the CBO's figures. But living longer can solve it. Why? Well, as seniors see their capacity for productive. You're going to be 40 again. If you're going to be 40 to 60 for not 20 years, but 40 or 50 years, you will work 10 additional years. The number of retireds remains relatively static. If each 61-year-old worker today were to labor just 1 year longer than expected due to improved health, the average age of retirement in America is 61 now. That's when people do it. It would increase GDP by 340 billion, about 1.5%. That's 340 billion more than anticipated, and that's just for 1 year in one age group. By the way, federal revenues would increase by 58 billion and local government by 34 billion. But now take that out to 10 years, it's 3.4 trillion if they work 10 years of that 20 or 30-year extra. That's 3.4 trillion. And imagine that instead of one age group does it, you get 10 age groups do it. Even the federal deficit starts to decline. So living longer can save our busted budgets. So 5 tips: change your attitude. You are a genetic engineer for you. Only eat food you love that loves you back. Choose your team. Add speed to body and brain. 4 smells a day, 4 cups of coffee a day, and half tablespoon of extra olive oil. And make sure you cultivate your posse and purpose. Thank you, and that's it. And I'm going to stop the screen share and let you ask questions, Rachel.
Dr. Roizen, thank you so much. We have time for a couple quick questions. So there's been a lot also shared about the importance of gut health links to overall physical and mental health. Is that also an important part of longevity? And is this another way to reset our bodies?
We don't know enough about the microbiome. We do know how important it is. That is, your gut is the largest immune system and the second largest brain that is capacity for neurologic cells, neurons in your body. And so it obviously has a lot of importance. And we know a bunch of tricks such as bovine colostrum, 2,000 milligrams a day, and 3 different probiotics over a 3-day period that seem to help in preventing a lot of both bloating and gut dysfunction and mental dysfunction. So the gut is incredibly important. We don't know about it yet. That is, there's a paucity of evidence about what we do know now, most of which is incomplete. In 5 to 10 years, we'll know a lot more.
And how does fasting help with reversing aging?
In the programs I showed, fasting, the data on fasting, and people have every definition of fasting. The component of fasting that works best, so far as the data have seen, is a 750 calorie 5-day low protein, low carbohydrate diet 5 days a month. That's been shown in randomized controlled trials in 25 to 30-year-olds and 35 to 40-year-olds and 45 to 50-year-olds, and now in 65 to 70-year-olds and in 75 to 80-year-olds to reset your genes to a younger, and to reset every aging marker to a younger marker. 750 calories, it is your regular diet, just reduced the first day, and then you go on, essentially, it's sold as Prolon. You can look at the original data was a tomato-based soup, 36 ounces of diced tomatoes, 12 ounces of corn niblets, onions and spices to taste, and 48 ounces of water. You have 17 portions of that a day. That's all you eat for 5 days in a row. It ends up turning on a ketotic switch, which then after you resume the Mediterranean or whatever diet you're on, resumes by resetting your genes to a younger set. So that appears to be the best there is. for fasting. Intermittent fasting, which is shorter periods of eating during the day. For example, I eat from 11 to 7, and doing that, but having protein, at least 40 grams of protein if you're 50 or older at each of the periods of, say, 11, 3, and 6:30 or whatever, is also shown to be beneficial. But I wrote a whole book on that, what to eat when.
Well, we have quickly hit our 12:30 mark, and I will be sure to share in the follow-up email links to Dr. Roizen's work so that for those who are interested can follow up and learn more, because we certainly have just scratched the surface today. So Dr. Roizen, thank you for joining us and sharing such great insights into all of the work that you're doing.
My privilege, and the key point I just want to make one more time is your choices matter. So whether you have sugar today, whether you have red meat today, whether you walk today, all have huge, and whether you call a friend today, all have huge impacts on how your genes function. It isn't trivial. Your choices make a difference. So thank you for letting me get that in, Rachel.
Thank you so much.